Washington District of Criminals, Washington, D.C. It's defrauding the public, lying, stealing your money, ripping you off in every possible way. It is corrupt to the core. It is categorically corrupt. As it presently functions, the U.S. government is nothing but a criminal conspiracy to defraud the public. I've promised that in 1993 we would spend a lot of time on the Federal Reserve, talking about this incredible heist, you know, the theft of the century. We've done several programs recently on this subject. I need to know how much time I have left. You can tell me verbally if you wouldn't mind. 10 minutes, all right. I just want to repeat a couple of basic thoughts here about the Federal Reserve. The Federal Reserve Bank is not part of the federal government, and therefore the United States economy is totally under the control of a private corporation. The Federal Reserve isn't federal. It's a private bank, profit-making bank, a private corporate bank. And to verify that this is true, simply look in the phone book under U.S. government agencies. Where is the Federal Reserve? It's not listed. You have to look under private businesses. And there you'll find it is listed with all of the other non-federal federals like Federal Express, the Federal Laundry, the Federal Hamburger Joint. It's a deception. It's something done on purpose to deceive you. A private profit-making business is deliberately and deceptively called federal. They say the Fed is, sometimes you'll hear them say the Fed is independent. Well, that's a very slick euphemism for private, profit-making corporation. It's a pure deception. The Federal Reserve is a system whereby the legally elected government is increasingly under the control of a private corporation, a bank. This is unlawful, it is unconstitutional, and in my opinion, the purpose of the Federal Reserve is to create, literally the purpose is to create an unpayable debt. I don't care what they tell you. This $4 trillion debt is absolutely unpayable, and that has to do not with the behavior of government. It has to do with something called compound interest. We have compound interest gone berserk, and the debt is now exponential. It is increasing, eating or feeding upon itself at an ever-increasing rate. And these politicians know it, but they won't tell you. They won't tell you that they are basically serving a plan that was developed about 250 years ago by a man named Rothschild. His dream was the conquest of the world by international banking, and he has just about succeeded. I believe the Federal Reserve Act itself is an act of political subversion, and we're going to keep talking about this in depth in the future. A sovereign. A sovereign is the opposite of a subject. A sovereign is the opposite of a slave. If you looked at if you looked at a sovereign man or a sovereign woman, you'd be looking at someone who is not being enslaved, who is not being subjugated, who is not being dictated to or dominated by external authority. A sovereign is someone who exists under the common law, whose fundamental premise is simply that as long as you aren't hurting anyone, as long as you aren't damaging anyone, you're free to do or not do exactly as you please. If you're a sovereign, it's your life, and you're at liberty to pursue happiness in whatever way that you choose to do so. Now, in case you've forgotten, that is what the Founding Fathers intended when they created America, the world's first free country, by implementing the Constitution and the Bill of Rights. It was, to say the least, a very bold idea. It was, in truth, a radical idea. a nation of the people, by the people, for the people, where we, the people, are the sovereigns and the government is the subject, even the slave. It was and still is the most revolutionary and evolutionary idea ever attempted by the human species. It shook up the world because it threatened the very foundations of traditional power, which have always been based on lineage and wealth. The Founding Fathers were considered, even by their friends and family, to be extremely radical men. And if they were alive today, they would be considered by most people to be extremely radical men, because without a doubt they would be challenging almost every aspect of our present government, which I have described on this program quite frequently as the new and ever so improved Soviet Union. Under these conditions, where virtually every single aspect of our lives is being dictated and dominated by government, by unelected managers and bureaucrats, compelling us under duress, compelling us to conform to rules and regulations that we have no part in making. Under these conditions, it isn't hard to imagine the Founding Fathers plotting the overthrow of the current regime, seeing it as a travesty of their original design. Indeed, seeing it as a mockery of their original concept. I mean, it goes without saying, doesn't it, that their original concept has been subverted in every imaginable way, from every imaginable direction, to the point that our reality is now 180 degrees diametrically opposite to their ideal. How can you call this America, they might ask? Just look around you. Do you see any sovereigns? Do you know any people who are not being increasingly dictated to, regulated, and subjugated by external authority over which they have no control? Well, I know a few. I've recently had the pleasure to meet them, and it's quite impressive. It gives me hope because the mechanism still exists to bring about the condition of sovereignty. There's a movement across America, sometimes called the Patriot Movement. It's not right or left, it's just people from all sides, from all belief systems, who are coming together to save America, to save the Constitution and the Bill of Rights, to save those precious documents, those divinely inspired documents, which constitute the necessary framework for human development and human evolution. And paralleling the Patriot Movement, and the most important key in its success, is the sovereignty movement. A few weeks ago, we did a program with John Atkinson on state citizenship and sovereignty, and the phone just literally jumped off the hook for several days. In fact, it hasn't completely stopped.